Hi, my name is Lisa, and today I'll be talking to you a little bit about blood. Now, whether or not you've studied blood in your classes, we've all come in contact with blood. Whether we cut our finger or we fall and we scrape our knee, when that blood comes gushing out, that red stuff that we see, we all try to get a Band-Aid and cover it up. But what exactly makes up blood? That's what we're going to be diving into a little bit today. So there are four main types of tissue in our body. There is epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscle tissue, and nervous tissue. Blood is part of that second group that I mentioned. Blood is a specialized type of connective tissue where the matrix of it consists of a free-flowing ground substance called plasma. 55% of blood is plasma. Plasma is made up of water, proteins, and other solutes like nutrients and gases. But today we're going to be focused on the other 45% of blood, which are called formed elements. Those formed elements include red blood cells, which make up 99% of the formed elements, platelets, also known as thrombocytes, which make up about less than 1%, and white blood cells, leukocytes, my favorite. Those also make up less than 1% of the formed elements, but they play a major role in immunology, which we'll discuss today. So those white blood cells, also known as leukocytes, can be categorized into two different groups. There are granular leukocytes and granular, meaning granules within the cell. And those granular leukocytes are neutrophils, basophils, and eosinophils. And then the other group is the agranular leukocyte group. Agranular meaning without or no granules. And those leukocytes include lymphocytes, which give us our T cells and our B cells and our natural killer cells, and monocytes, which give us macrophages. So we're going to be discussing a little bit about each of those groups that I mentioned. So leukocytes are nucleated cells, meaning they have a nucleus, not to be confused with the red blood cells, which do not have nuclei. So neutrophils are the first group that we're going to be discussing. It consists of the largest group of white blood cells. About 60 to 70% of circulating leukocytes are neutrophils. So if we were to look at a histological stain or a blood smear and see leukocytes, what we would see is a nucleus with 2 to 4 lobes that are connected by a thin strand. And so you'll be able to see that later, but just remember, we have multiple lobes and a thin strand. Some of the functions of neutrophils is that it's the fastest response of all leukocytes to bacteria. It recognizes bacteria and other infectious agents and actually phagocytoses, or eats that bacteria. And its direct actions are against bacteria by also releasing something called lysozymes that destroy and digest bacteria, and they release defensin proteins that act like antibiotics to destroy that bacteria. The next group are our eosinophils. Their nucleus is typically bilobed, meaning there are two parts of the nucleus connected once again by a thin strand. Their cytoplasm contains large and uniform-sized granules that stain orange and red with acidic dyes. Those granules are important because they contain 4 major proteins that allow eosinophils to fight off also infectious agents. The percentage of eosinophils, though, compared to neutrophils are much, much lower. So if you remember, neutrophils make up 60 to 70% of circulating white blood cells. Eosinophils only make up 2 to 4%. And I have a mnemonic that I'll teach you to remember the percentage of the different white blood cells. Next are basophils. Basophils, in terms of their nucleus, it's large, irregular, sometimes S-shaped, bilobed nuclei. Their cytoplasm contains large variable-sized granules that stain blue and purple with basic dyes, not to be confused with eosinophils that stain orange, red with acidic dyes. So basophils make up less than 1% of circulating leukocytes. They are the lowest percentage of white blood cells, but that doesn't make them any less important. They heighten the inflammatory response and account for hypersensitivity or allergic reactions. They leave the capillaries and enter the connective tissue and release heparin, histamine, leukotrienes. These are all things that we'll talk about at a later time, but that help fight off that hypersensitivity reaction that's going on. So those are the 3 granular leukocytes. And so let's take a quick break here to look at the histology and test our knowledge and if we can remember them. So this one here, let's see, what do we see? We see the white blood cell here. These around it are the red blood cells. As you can see, they lack nuclei. But this one here, it's a white blood cell, we know. How many lobes in the nucleus do you see? I see 2, and I see that there's a thin strand that connects the 2. Can you remember which one of them were bilobed and had a thin strand? Okay, if you said eosinophil, you are correct. So good job. We'll come back to more of those later on. Now, in terms of the agranular leukocytes, there are lymphocytes and monocytes. Lymphocytes have a diameter that can vary between 6 to 30 micrometers. They are classified as small, medium, and large size because of such a wide range of diameter sizes. Their nucleus is usually dark and oval to round. The cytoplasm is thin, so you'll see that the nucleus kind of takes up most of the cell shape, and there's a little thin area around it. That is the cytoplasm. The percentage of lymphocytes in our body are 20 to 25% of circulating white blood cells. Now, what are the functions of it? Lymphocytes give off our T cells, our B cells, and our natural killer cells. And all of those cells are important in immunity and attacking virus, fungi, transplanted organs, and we'll talk more about that in the future as well. Monocytes are the second group of agranular leukocytes, and their average diameter is about 18 micrometers. The nucleus here is special because it appears to be indented. It almost resembles a kidney shape. It is the largest white blood cell in circulating blood, but it does not remain in the blood for long, only about 3 days before migrating into the tissue. It can differentiate, meaning it can turn into different types of macrophages in specific tissue. So in connective tissue, it goes in and it becomes what's called a histocyte, which is still a macrophage, just in connective tissue. It can go into the lungs and become alveolar macrophages or dust cells, and it can go into the liver and become Kupffer cells. Now they're doing the same thing in all these different parts, they just have a different name. Now their function, they take a little longer to get to a site of infection, but they arrive in large numbers. And during inflammation, these monocytes will leave the capillaries and enter those sites that I talked about, the different organs or tissue, and transform into macrophage, which function as these signals to the immune system saying, hey, there's a problem. We need to take care of this invader right now. They phagocytose or eat bacteria and tissue debris following an infection. And that's why they are important. Now, for us to remember these 5 different white blood cell types, there is a mnemonic I like to use. It's never let monkeys eat bananas. M-E-B. That's the order of the percentage of cells circulating in the blood. So N is neutrophils. That is the highest percentage of white blood cells circulating in the blood, 60 to 70%. And those numbers increase in bacterial, usually acute or sudden or short bacterial infection. Then we have lymphocytes, which make up 20 to 25% of circulating white blood cells, and those increase in chronic infections and cancers. Then we have monocytes, which comprise about 3 to 8% of circulating white blood cells, and those increase in fungal and viral infections. Then we have eosinophils, which make up about 2 to 4% of circulating white blood cells, and those will go up in parasitic infections. And then lastly, we have the basophils. Those make up about less than 1% of circulating white blood cells, but those go up in an allergic reaction. So these are important. You don't need to memorize the numbers, but memorizing the order in which they circulate, which one is there more, and we know it's neutrophils. Well, if there are more neutrophils, no wonder they can get to a bacterial infection really fast. There's more of them. And they're important for doctors especially to look at a lab report and see, okay, I have all of my list of white blood cells. Which one of these is elevated? If we were to see maybe lymphocytes being elevated, the doctor might decide to work that patient up or do more tests to test for a chronic illness, such as a cancer. So let's do a few more examples before I let you go. Histology blood smears. So this one, how many lobes, what is going on here? So the nucleus is clearly not round. It looks like it's divided into several lobes. There's at least, I count, at least 4 different lobes here in the nucleus. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they are connected by that thin strand. Let's see which one of the white blood cells had nucleus that have multiple lobes, about 2 to 4, and connected by a thin strand. If you said neutrophils, you are correct. Okay. Oh, wait, and neutrophils. Do we remember which infection we would see a high number of neutrophils? Would it be in a viral infection, parasitic infection, fungal infection? Yeah, bacterial infection. We have this cell here that it's indented, and it doesn't look like a kidney, but it's indented, and we can remember that that one is our monocyte. So I hope that you learned something with me today. If you have any questions, you can always feel free to reach out, and that is just a basic overview of the white blood cells. Thank you.